Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's been good. Hope everybody's been well. Let's see. So, as you all can tell by the title today, we got something in store for you all. We're going to bring out some pretty good information today, most high willing. You all are edified and enjoyed it. Like I said a few videos ago, we're going to be getting ready to finish up, basically talking about genetics and all that stuff before we get back to the history of things, bringing out the history, bringing out the evidence to who we are, things of that sort. But as of today, we're going to be getting into the E1b1a legacy in the Israelite people. Within the Israelite nation, we're going to show how, Israelites did have E1b1a, and they still do to this day. And we're just going to, bring out the information and material for our people to have in the near future. All right, let's see. So again, shalom to everybody in the chat. If you have any questions, please drop them. Welcome back. And let's go ahead and get straight to the information. I'm going to go ahead and share my page, on my screen rather, and we're going to get straight into the information for today. Let's see. How are we going to do this? I'll just share the whole screen. All right. Yes, sir. Shalom, brother. Support the channel indeed. Supporting channel indeed. And make sure to put them thumbs up. Like the video, like the brother said. So I'm going to start from the beginning. Actually, let me go out real quick and make sure the video is viewable like this. All right. So again, E1b1a in the ancient Israelites or in Israel. That's what we're going to be dealing with today. So the first source we'll be dealing with is coming from Your DNA Guide. Just a quick article. I'm going to start at the very top. So today, EM2 is the most common and diversified haplogroup in Western Africa. It holds up to 70 to 90% of the population, and also has a moderate prominence in Central Africa and the African Great Lakes region in South Africa, between 20 to 60%. A well-recognized event called the Bantu expansion spread its language and also genetic characteristics from North Africa. All right, from North Africa and East-West corridor and South in two waves of migration 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. All right, if you've been up to date with my channel, if you've been watching my channel over the last few months, we've already covered, the Bantu expansion and how that actually connects with the Assyrian exile, which happened between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. But it says this movement displaced other populations' genetic traits with the now very prominent EM2 and arrived in South Africa as early as 300 CE. EM2 is found in Africa outside of this main path, but with much lower prevalence in North and East Africa, around 10%. So EM2 travels globally. It says EM2 also moved anciently. All right, so we have ancient movements before the Bantu expansion. So it says EM2 also moved anciently into the Middle East and the Mediterranean islands. All right, and of course, this is dealing with the out of Africa theory. So from our standpoint, we was already outside of Africa and migrated into Africa. So this will actually cover our ancient tracks within the Middle East and the Mediterranean seas. But it says Mediterranean islands and groups seen today in low frequencies in some of these communities, around 1 to 2% occurrence. And we should expect to see this if the Israelites fled into Africa, as history says. It says the transatlantic slave trade also brought EM2 to the Americas beginning 400 years ago, with a strong predominance of this haplogroup in West Africa, 70 to 90%, where the embarkments took place. All right, so let's continue on to the next source. Next source we're going to be getting into is the genetics of Africa, or African populations in health and disease. Now, before I get into the Israelites, I'm just going to give you a brief overview, just a brief overview of how EM2 or E1b1a specifically is a Semitic lineage, and how it being in Israelites wouldn't be so surprising. So we're going to start at the highlighted. It says, for example, this article by Underhill in 2000, it states that V38/M35 lineages was carried into the Near East from Africa in the Mesolithic. It says this V38/M35 in Africa corresponds to the article right here that's mentioned. I don't want to butcher it, but it says it is far more likely that the pre-Proto-Semitic speakers went into Africa at this time, where the Semitic languages have long since dominated. All right, so we see that actually the basal E1b1a branch was responsible with EM35 or E1b1b for spreading the pre-Proto-Semitic languages into the Near East. But it goes on to say, but the predominant haplotypes in most Semitic-speaking populations are variants of V2 and V3, or rather 6 and 8 within this article mentioned. But it goes on to say which are equivalent to M89 associated lineages. So it says that E1b1a or EV38 and EM35 were a part of the pre-Proto-Semitic speakers, but today the most prominent Semitic speaking peoples are the EM89 branch, which is a E1b1b branch. That doesn't mean E1b1a isn't Semitic. That doesn't mean EM35 isn't Semitic. That just means that the predominant lineage that's associated with Semitic languages today is EM89. Now, why is this important? Why is it important that E1b1a went into the Middle East and was speaking Semitic languages? Because if we go to this article right here, Genetic Insight or Genomic Insight into the origins of the farming of the ancient Near East, it tells us that craniometric analysis has suggested an affinity between the Natufians and the populations of North or Sub-Saharan Africa. As a result, that finds some support from the Y chromosome analysis showing that the Natufians and successor Levantine Neolithic populations carried haplogroup E. All right. So they would have carried haplogroup E, E1b1a, E1b1b, those specific haplotypes. All right. And it says likely to be ultimately African origin. And we're going to skip this right here. So next article we're going to be jumping to is punctuated Burson and human male demography inferred from 1,244 worldwide Y chromosome sequences. All right. And again, we're just establishing that E is a Semitic branch and arose outside the continent. Starting at the highlighted, we see a notable increase in the number of lineages outside of Africa, 50 to 55,000 years ago, perhaps reflecting the geographic expansion and differentiation of Eurasian populations as they settled the vast expanse of these continents, consistent with previous proposals. All right. So a parsimonious interpretation of the phylogeny is that the predominant African haplogroup E arose outside of Africa, or arose outside the continent where we mostly see it today. So there had to be a migration of these E peoples into Africa. But it goes on to say something very important. This model of geographic segregation within the CT clade requires just one continental haplogroup exchange, E to Africa, rather than 3, D, C, and F out of Africa. All right. So it makes more sense for haplogroup E to have migrated into Africa than for these haplogroups to migrate outside of Africa, such as E, D, C, and F. Continuing. Carriers of mitochondrial DNA macrohaplogroup L3 basic lineages migrate back to Africa from Asia around 70,000 years ago. So again, the highlighted. A parsimonious interpretation of the Y chromosome phylogy constructed with these variants is that the predominant African haplogroup E arose outside the continent and back migrated to Africa, all right? It back migrated to Africa. Continuing, it seems that E and the L2/L3 expansions were the strongest in the Western Sahel and Western Guinea, where they substituted the majority of the oldest MT DNA L0 and L1 and Y chromosome AB lineages. So if you look over here at the map, this is what we would expect to see: these E lineages coming down into Africa, taking over and dominating, as we saw within the Bantu expansion, and as we see through different historical events, such as the Jewish-Roman wars of North Africa, with them coming down and causing havoc, after dealing with the Romans, and even doing Eldad's story, where he told us what was going on, that the Israelites came into the Sub-Saharan African region and was warring with the Cushite tribes, taking them as slaves and taking much spoil from their lands. So again, we're going to go to this article real quick just to show how, a people that was associated with Afro-Asiatic languages or spoke Semitic languages or spoke Hebrew could lose their tongue. So right here, starting at the highlighted, it says, interesting. This ancestral cluster includes populations like the Fulani, who has previously shown to display Eastern African ancestry. Common history with the Hausa, who are the furthest Afro-Asiatic speakers in the west in the Sahel, with a large effective size and complex genetic background. The Fulani, who currently speak a language classified as Niger Kordofan, may have lost their original tongue. All right. So when we go to your Igbos, when we go to your Arubas, when we go to your certain Bantu tribes, all right, this is the same thing, or this same possibility or scenario would apply to them, because they are not originally Niger Kordofan speakers or Niger Congo speakers. So again, the Fulani, who currently speak the language classified as Niger Kordofan, may have lost their original tongue to associated sedimentary groups similar to other cattle herders in Africa, a common tendency among pastoralists. And they said this is even common amongst these people to lose their original tongue. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to continue on. So, next article right here, the genetic history of the Israelite nation. We're going to start right here on the Y chromosome. And it says, a genetic paternal lineage from the patriarch Jacob is generally thought to define Jewishness. Yet early analysis with limited data concluded that more than one Y chromosome haplogroup exists among modern Jews. All right. So if more than one haplogroup exists among modern Jews, that means they all cannot descend from Jacob. Jacob only had one haplogroup, not multiple. It says, does this contradict the biblical narrative? Actually, no. When comparing the Y chromosome haplotypes found in the Jewish and non-Jewish Middle Easterners, it is clear that they share a common pool of sequences. And we would know that these common pool of sequences, or these common haplotypes they share, will be Japhetic lineages. But it goes on to say the two together are distinct from non-Jewish groups in Europe, North Africa, South Africa. But the majority of the non-Middle Eastern Jews also trace back to the Middle Eastern Y chromosome source, which they classify as J1, I believe. Meaning all three groups, Middle Eastern Jews, Middle Eastern non-Jews, and European Jews, come from the same parental stock. All right. So even Middle Eastern Jews, Middle Easterners who are not Jews, and even European Jews come from the same parental stock. So let's skip down to this next highlight. It says the multiplicity of distinct ancestral paternal lineages is due to the extensive mixing between Jews and non-Jews throughout their history. Let me read that again. The multiplicity of distinct ancestral paternal lineages is due to the extensive mixing between Jews and non-Jews throughout their history. plus the possibility of founder effects at different places in Jewish history. In other words, it is possible that a non-Jewish Y chromosome is found at a higher than expected frequency in specific Jewish populations, all right? This is why we see majority of modern day Jews possessing haplogroup J. This is why we see majority of modern day populations of Jews possessing haplogroup R. This is why we see these Jews today possessing all these different paternal haplogroups, but we see this one small thing within them. We see this one small haplotype within them, and that's E1b1a. Well, not in all of them, but in some, and we'll go over that. But among the Sephardic Jews, Y chromosomes from a diverse background can be found. The majority come from haplogroup J, strongly associated with the Middle Eastern peoples, but others are from E1b1a and E1b1b, common in Africa and other places. Now, again, it's important to note that E1b1a, E1b1b, these are ancient Middle Eastern haplogroups that migrated into Africa to this day. So this is why we see them classifying these two paternal haplogroups or these two haplotypes as African. But R1a up to 30% in Ashkenazi men, R1b, the most common lineage in Europe, Q, found in Asia, I in Europe but rare, and even G, which is mainly in Western Asia. It goes on to say this, the distribution of haplogroups found among the Spanish Sephardim was similar to Jewish populations in Turkey, sometimes included within the term Sephardim. This pattern also held for Jewish men from northeast Portugal. Nearly 1/3 of the Y chromosomes were European, R1b, common in Eastern Europe, and over 1/2 were Middle Eastern, 37, which they classify as J, and 16T. So note that the Middle Eastern chromosomes come from diverse lineages, all right? And again, the so-called Middle East, that encompasses a vast majority. That's not just talking about the Levant. And even if you watch my last video dealing with the sons of Japhet migrating into, the Levant, we see how these lineages got there. And then if we look over here to the right, we see that the majority of the Jewish man belong to J. There is no intended association between J and Jewish, all right? Or there's no intent, yes, there's no intended association between J and Jewish. So they're saying there's really not no linkage between J being Jewish. So continuing, let's start at the very top. The claims above were made on limited data. Studies often use only a few tandem repeats that have high rate back of mutation, not fully sequenced chromosomes. This type of data is only used for analyzing recent events. Re-examining such data caused this article, which was published in 2014, to conclude that while one might be able to draw conclusions about the founding of various Jewish groups, the fact that multiple diverse lineages exist in these populations and that these lineages exist in non-Jewish groups as well. All right. So the lineages that are found within today's Jews, there's other people that also have them, right? There's other European ethnic groups that have them. There's other Iranian ethnic groups that have them, other than the people that claim to be Jews. So it says highlights the lack of support for using them either as markers of Jewish ancestry or biblical tales. So they're basically saying that there's not even enough evidence to use these people today as, people to, I guess you can say, as people to base Jewish populations on, because they're so diverse and there's nothing in common with them. Like there's not just a Jewish group or a known Jewish group that has one paternal haplogroup, like your Igbo, like your Ewe, like your Yoruba. These people that we know are Israelites. So, yet these comments were premature. Further analysis of fully sequenced Y chromosome indicates that the Ashkenazi individuals who carry the European Y chromosomes of haplogroup R are not, in fact, related to the European branches in the Y chromosome tree. Even though this family might be common in Europe, the Jewish versions were found to branch off earlier and be more closely related to the Middle Eastern man who carry haplogroup R. The clear implication is that this old pre-diaspora, possibly non-Jacob descended Y chromosome family, which is now found within a greater Jewish population. So again, haplogroup R is a non-Jacob descent Y chromosome, and even haplogroup J. But it says the majority of the lines really go back to the Middle Eastern setting, but would we expect them to go back to a single person? In fact, no, we would not, based on the known history of the nation of Israel. All right. So again, these lineages might go back to the Middle East or the Near East, but do they go back to Jacob? So multiple Jewish subpopulations also carry African DNA, 3 to 5%, with the estimated mixing date of 70 generations ago. This is much older than the other groups, going back more than 2,000 years. This means that African ancestry was almost certainly among them prior to the diaspora. Again, this means the African ancestry was almost certainly among them prior to the diaspora. So they're saying the Israelites had African ancestors. And we're going to get into what they mean by those African ancestors. Yet, even this is much later than the biblical date for the founding of Israel. It is only about halfway to Abraham. Genetic evidence being what it is, all we can say is that the Jews in the Old Testament times already had small portions of African ancestry. All right, and we're not saying small portions, we're saying large portions. And we're going to get into it. But it says this may not turn up in the Y chromosome or mitochondrial studies due to genetic drift. All right. And so this African ancestry or this E1b1a might not show up in the Y chromosomes or mitochondrial studies of modern day Jews due to genetic drift, where lineages tend to be lost. All right. So and it goes on to say, and founder events, but it has carried over to the rest of the genome. So let's get into the next article. And of course, we've read this before, but we're going to dig a little deeper. The history of African gene flow in Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. Introduction. The history of human migrations from Africa to Western Asia is only partially understood. Archaeological and genetic evidence indicate that automatically modern humans arrived in Europe from Africa, from an African source at least 45,000 years ago, following the initial dispersal out of Africa. However, it is known that Southern Europeans and Levantines, people from modern-day Palestine, Israel, Syria, and Jordan, have also inherited genetic material of African origin due to subsequent migrations, all right? And I'm saying rather that these will be migrations of these quote-unquote Africans from Israel or from the Near East into Africa. Let's see. One line of evidence comes from the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA analysis. So throughout this, to find that these Israelites had African ancestries, they are using the Y chromosome. Now, again, we're going to go down to this highlighted section where it says throughout this report, we use African ancestry or African mixture to refer to gene flow into Western Eurasians since the divergence of the latter from East Asians. And if we go over here to the results, we will see that the Yoruba Nigerians are used to represent the Sub-Saharan Africans, all right, although other populations were used, and we'll see that as well. So let's see. Let's go over to the discussion where it says one potential opportunity for African gene flow was during the period of the Roman occupation of North Africa that lasted until the early 5th century AD. And indeed, tomb inscriptions and literary references suggest the trade relations continued even after that. Now they're saying a possibility, some of these Europeans, actually, this is dealing with the Europeans within this topic or within this discussion that we're reading right now, the European admixture. But it goes on to say that It was caused due to, I guess you can say, the Roman occupation within North Africa. And if we know about or if you know the history about the Jewish Roman wars in North Africa, you will know that the Jews were pushed down into Western Africa, down into the Sahara, into the Niger River bend, all right, in 1115 AD. And we would expect them to possess that M2 and bring it down into the Niger River area. But again, it says another potential source of some of the African ancestry, especially in Spain and Portugal, is the invasion of the Iberia by the Moorish armies after 711 AD. If the Moors already had some African ancestry when they arrived in Southern Europe and then admixed with Iberians, we should expect the admixture date to be older than the date of the invasion as we observe. And we know some of the Moors had E1b1a, but majority of them was E1b1b. But it goes on to say again, the signal of African admixture that we detected in Levantines, specifically Bedouins, Palestinians, and Druze, is on an average of 32 generations or 1,000 years ago. It's more recent than the signal in Europeans, which might be related to the migrations between North Africa and Middle East that have occurred over the last 1,000 years in proximity of the Levantine groups geographically into Africa. All right. So let's continue on. I'm going to start at this highlighted section or the sentence above. It says a striking find from our study is the consistent detection of 3 to 5% Sub-Saharan African ancestry in the 8 diverse Jewish groups we study: Ashkenazis, Sephardics, Mizrahis. And it says this pattern was not detected in previous analysis of mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome data. And although it can be seen when re-examining published results of structure-like analysis of autosomal data, it was not highlighted in those studies. All right, so they're basically saying right here that this pattern this pattern that they found was not detected in previous studies when dealing with mitochondrial DNA or Y chromosome DNA. And although it can be seen when re-examining it, it was not highlighted in those studies or shown to unambiguously reflect Sub-Saharan African admixture. But it goes on to say, we estimate that the average date of the mixture of 72 generations. So they're saying it's an estimated date of 72 generations within these quote unquote 8 diverse Jewish groups. They're assuming 2,000 years equals 2,000 years, assuming 29 years per generation. And they're saying that this is older than the admixture or the ancestry found within the Southern Europeans and the Levantines. The point estimates overall populations are between 1,600 and 3,400 years ago. All right. And that'll put us right back. If we just deal with 3,400 years ago, that'll put us right back to the Exodus. That E1b1a will be a part of the Israelite population. But it goes on to say, but with the larger overlapping confidence intervals, it is intriguing that the Mizrahi, Iran, and Iraqi Jews, who are thought to be descendants, at least in part, from Jews who Jews who were exiled to Babylon about 2,600 years ago, share the signal of African admixture. So they have some of them have E1b1a, as we're going to look at the chart later. But it goes on to say that a parsimonious explanation for these observations is that they reflect a history in which many of the Jewish groups descended from a common ancestry population, which was itself admixed with Africans prior to the beginning of the Jewish diaspora that occurred in the 8th and 6th century BCE. So they're saying before the 8th and 6th century BCE, the Israelites had E1b1a. Or they're basically saying, or let's read it, it says Jewish groups descended from a common ancestral population, which was itself admixed with Africans. All right, so the question would be admixed with what? It would be E1b1a and what other haplogroups? Would it be E1b1a and haplogroup J, E1b1a and haplogroup R, E1b1a and haplogroup T? What would it be? If we look at the history, from our studies, it would be the Israelites were E1b1a And after these exiles, after they start going into these other countries, other places, that's when we started to get all these other lineages. That's where we started to get the J lineages from, the R lineages from. All right. So it says a potential issue that could, in the theory, influence our findings is that the exact population contributing to African ancestry in West Eurasia is unknown. All right. So they don't even know where this ancestry is coming from. All right. They think it's coming from quote unquote West Africans, but it's actually coming from the Israelites themselves. And again, the E1b1a tribes that they use in this is actually the Luya Bantu of Kenya and even the Yoruba Nigerians. And again, it says historically a mixture of West and East African ancestry is plausible since African gene flow into West Eurasia is documented from both West Africa during Roman times and from East Africa during migrations from Egypt. All right. And we know the Bantus migrated their way down through Israel into Egypt, into East Africa. Some went into West Africa. Some went down into Central and South Africa. All right. And it says our roll-off admixture date estimates are also similar, whether we use the Luya Bantu or the Yoruba to represent ancestral African populations as we predicted by the theory. All right. So they're saying that this admixture is the same whether they use the Luya Bantu or if they use the Yoruba Nigerians. And again, both of these tribes possess E1b1a. And again, this is the table showing the ancestry, the date of ancestry within these populations tested within this study. And just to get an understanding of it, we can look at the African Americans who we are, and we see that we have quote unquote around 70%, 79% West African ancestry, or 79% of us have E1b1a. All right, and this goes back 6 generations. We can even see within Palestinians that 9% of them had West African ancestry or E1b1a. All right, and that goes back 34 generations. We see Bedouins with E1b1a, 15%, 34 generations. And even if we go down here to your Ashkenazi Jews, we see 3.2 of them with E1b1a or West African ancestry, which goes back 76 generations. Syrian Jews, 4.1%, 99 generations. Or excuse me, 70 generations. I'm sorry. But again, Iraqi Jews, 4.5%, which goes back to 115 generations. The far right is letting us know the corrected estimation of the admixture after the bias. And again, the Sephardics of Greek or the Greek Sephardic Jews, 3.7%, goes back 62 generations. And we know about the Black Sephardic Jews going into, Spain and Portugal from Babylon. We would expect them to bring E1b1a into Spain around this time. Sephardic Jews in Turkey, 4.3%, 73 generations. And even the Italian Jews have E1b1a at 4%, going back 73 generations. All right, shalom, shalom, family. So now that we've established that the Israelites had E1b1a, prior to the diasporas, and we can even see E1b1a in these populations of Jews that they test today. They haven't even tested the legitimate Jews, the West African Jewry. Now that we've went over that, we're going to look at the West African / Middle Eastern affiliation, or we're going to look at West African affiliation in the Middle East. And again, I'm looking at the chat from my phone, but yes, brother, Ahaya be praised. Those are very old admixtures, all right? And that will mean, those people, ancestors had E1b1a during the dates of those admixtures, as they suppose. But again, West African ancestry in southern or southeastern Europe and the Middle East. Let's see where we shall start. So let's just start at the top. It says we can note from figure 6 through 3 and 6 through 4 that as we proceed from Ireland to India, the levels of West African affiliation gradually increases. So once you go from Ireland to India, you can see, an increase of West African affiliation. Though the levels in Southeastern Europe are much greater than those in Northern Europe, with the MLE program, the sample sizes of these populations in this study do not allow for a demonstration of statistical significance for these levels. However, in the Middle East and South Asia, the West African affiliations reaches levels that are so high that even with low sample sizes, we can show statistical significance. All right. So there's a very high West African affiliation within the Middle East and the South Asia. We showed you E1b1a in Oman. We showed you E1b1a in the Arab Emirates. All right. And there's even ancient DNA studies that they're hiding. Me and a brother came across something the other day where they're literally hiding information on E1b1a being found in Yemen around 3,000 years ago. But again, that's for a later topic. It says the geographical proximity of these regions to Africa may suggest relatively recent population expansions or migrations. All right. And yes, it would be a recent expansion if we're dealing with 2,000 to 3,000 years ago during the Bantu expansion. They're migrating from the Near East into Africa. And we know these people were coming from the Near East into Africa because they brought Near Eastern material culture. They brought things that were not in Africa until they came. So note that the further from the African continent one gets, the lower the West African affiliation. However, there is no reason to impose a recent timeline on such events. Other lines of evidence lend support for this finding of low levels of West African ancestry in Southeastern Europeans and the Middle Eastern populations. So this study in 2001 showed that the frequency of YAP-positive Y haplogroup, commonly referred to as Haplogroup E, is relatively high, about 25% in the Middle East and Mediterranean. This haplogroup E is the major haplogroup found in Sub-Saharan Africa, over 75% of the Y chromosomes. So it says the significance of our results suggests that the West African affiliation is a bona fide element of Middle Eastern population structure. All right. So West Africans, or quote unquote E1b1a, it had a bona fide element in the structure of the Middle Eastern populations. Let's skip down to the second highlighted. It says earlier population expansions of groups such as the Moors could also have contributed to West African admixture for Mediterranean and Middle Eastern populations. However, it seems unlikely that recent admixture will explain such a substantial distribution of West African character across South Asia and the Middle East, as we probably need to look at the shared common origin hypothesis in a bit more detail. So they're saying the affiliation of E1b1a in the Near East or the Middle East and South Asia is so high that it would be, unlikely that this was because of recent admixture. Like we've been saying, this is because of ancient migrations, or what you want to call it, ancient admixture from, West Africans, as they like to call them, coming from the Middle East into Africa. It's really that simple. It goes on to say, as mentioned, the distribution of the West African affiliation in Europe and the Middle East mirrored the distribution of the EY chromosome haplogroup, specifically the E3b haplogroup. E is largely confined to Africa, but is a YAP-containing haplogroup that could have very well originated in the Near East or in the remote parts of Northeast Africa. And even if they want to say the remote parts of Northeast Africa, that's really talking about the Negev. But continue. A spread of E throughout Africa, perhaps during the Bantu expansion, could be another factor. All right. And we know that the Bantu expansion is what caused, the spread of E1b1a coming into Africa, and we believe again that the Bantu expansion was actually the Israelites, the 10 tribes coming in to Africa from the Assyrian exile. We have no idea what these original Yap carriers look like, but common sense would dictate that since the descendants currently live in East Asia, Central Asia, the Near East, and Europe, populations among which prominent traits vary dramatically, and since the source was the same that contributed to most modern day Africans, they must have taken a decidedly non-European look or appearance. So they're basically letting us know that they don't know what the original Yap people look like or the E bearers look like, but they can say without a doubt that they don't look European. Let's see. Where should we continue? Let's continue reading. It says this is not to say that they must have looked Negroid in appearance, all right? But we know it was. According to Howell's study, 2,800 plus scores measuring chronomic variation in modern populations and prehistoric East African fossils, and the general conclusion from this work were that the prehistoric East Africans, presumably the earliest Yap carriers, were non-African in nature, that is not Negroid. And more than likely they're quoting or talking about the Natufians here. It says this is in contrast to skulls from modern day East Africans, although East Africa may have been the birthplace of non-African variants who migrated to populate the world. The ensuing picture for East Africa would later have been changed throughout replacement by the expansion of Bantu or Negroid tribes. And I'm looking at the chat again. And again, a higher be praised. You on it, man. You right in my mind. I was just about to say, more than likely, we look like Ramses III. More than likely, we look like Ramses III, then, and even Ramses III, people like to say he was a native Egyptian. But I advise people to go look at the 400-year stela done by his ancestors, and that'll let you know who he was. He was definitely Semitic. But let's continue. We're going to go to this article right here, the E180 splice mutation in the GHR gene causing Laron syndrome, witnesses of the Sephardic Jewish exodus from the Iberian Peninsula to the New World. Starting at the left, to verify the hypothesis that individuals with E180 splice mutation share a common ancestry, we analyzed the paternal lineage's origin, studying YSRTs or STRs of 10 families. And these are the 10 families, I believe. And it says 5 out of 10 showed the same haplogroups R1b, which is predominantly found in Western Eurasia, Spain, and Portugal. One of them showed haplogroup J, and 3 participants had haplotypes which belong to haplogroup E. All right. 2 participants showed sub-haplogroup E1b1a, and 1 had E1b1b. The haplogroups J and E are typically found in the Middle East and in Eastern European Jews. All right. So we see E1b1a in these Sephardic populations. We see it right here. One of them had it in Brazil, in Ecuador, and we see the E1b1b in Brazil as well. And even if I wanted to, I could have added all those other Sephardic Jewish studies. The one of Sao Tome, where they had around 90% E1b1a, the one in Cape Verde, where they had E1b1a, E1b1b, so it's really not surprising, and it really is common to see E1b1a in these Jews. That's why I don't understand why people are, trying to deny that we are the Israelites. So Jews and Muslims in British colonial America, we're looking at E3A or Sephardic Jew samples in New Mexico, and we see E3A right there. It's highlighted. Again, Sephardim in the New World. These are people who have Jewish surnames and have Jewish ancestry claims that descend from Sephardic Jews. Here we have Goins, E3A, and again, they call it the Sub-Saharan African type. Yet this is the haplotype of the ancient Israelites. And again, we don't believe R1b, J2, I, G, B. We don't believe those to be Semitic. We believe those to be those who cleaved on to the house of Israel. That's who we believe those people to be. So yes, they can be called Jews, but they aren't the Israelites. Again, Austin, E3a, Sub-Saharan Africa. They saying perhaps from times of the Roman occupation. All right. Again, we have Collins, E3a, Sub-Saharan African type. So now we're about to look at a couple of I guess you could say genetic samples and stuff from family tree DNA, and this is coming from the original genetic study on Sephardic Jewish ancestry in the Dominican Republic. And of course, we see 2 EM2 samples, which we should expect to see. All right, we see 2 EM2 samples, which we should expect to see. Sephardic heritage DNA. All right, and again, you can find all of these at family tree DNA. We see a lot of E samples, but what we're focused on is EM2. And again, these other E samples, such as EM35 or these other E1b1b samples, these could be from, we know the Moors were indeed E1b1b. We know that the Edomites at some point were converted, and a lot of our people, hold that the Edomites were E1b1b. So there you have it. It's possible. But we're going to jump back to the genetic history of the Israelite nation. It says a surprising percentage of men across Judaism who claim to belong to the Levitical priesthood, the Kohanim, share a common Y chromosome within a subgroup of haplogroup J. All right, and we've shown you the origins of haplogroup J, and it's impossible for this to be a Kohanim line or even a quote-unquote Israelite lineage. This is despite the fact that they have been separated in some cases for approximately 2,500 years. This Y chromosome type has been named the Cohen model haplotype. And I don't know how it's named the Cohen model haplotype when it could be found in non-Jews, people who don't claim to be Jews, such as Turks, Iranians, and men who carry it are more closely related to each other than they are to other Jews in the communities in which they live. So it says the CMH is rare in non-Levitical Jews. It's found in 50% of Levites and occur in a much higher portion of the Kohanim. But let's go down here where it says this leads us to a fascinating antecedent or anecdote that combines history, genetics, and oral traditions. The Lemba are a tribe from Southeast Africa with distinct customs and language. Their oral traditions claims they are Jewish descent of man involved in long-distance trade, but they are Bantu speakers and are surrounded by Bantu-speaking peoples. And who are the Bantu? The Bantu are descendants of Israelites. All right. Analysis of their Y chromosome revealed that more than half are of Middle Eastern origin, and more than half will be of Japhetic origin, opposed to Middle Eastern origin. Let me go back real quick. It says mitochondrial DNA, however, reveals no evidence of West Asian roots. This is consistent with the tradition that they were descended from Jewish traders coming down the coast from North Africa. All right, so I brought this out just so we can take a look at the Lemba DNA and show you how they shining all this light on the Lemba and the J lineage that they have. Just because the other Ashkenazis and Sephardic have that, I wanted to point out that they didn't bring any light, or they basically didn't shine any light on the fact that these people have EM2 as well. And even they have E1b1b as well. Ashkenazis, they have around, 10 to 15% of E1b1b. We just saw that they had around 3% EM2. Why is that not highlighted in this study? Again, we do not believe that J is Israelites. But again, I was just breaking this out to show you that the lineage or the Israelite lineage within the Limba would not be J, but rather E. Again, yet the Kohen model haplotype has been disputed for late, or as of late, specifically since it is also found in non-Jewish populations, as I said earlier. Some argue that the occurrence of the Kohen model haplotype is nothing more than a statistical anomaly. All right, so it says, of course, having Jewish Y chromosomes spread far and wide is expected based on biblical history, but the original studies were also performed on only a few Y chromosome markers. When the number of markers was increased, it was learned that the Kohanim carry multiple unrelated Y chromosome types, several of which predominate. Due to the random nature of paternity in small populations, it is possible that the original was lost, all right? It is possible that the original was lost. The original Kohen model haplotype was lost. So these people claiming to be Kohens today definitely aren't. The Kohen model haplotype would be EP2, or rather E1b1a. It goes on to say that an introgression occurred. So it was an introgression that occurred, which is why it was lost. And a subsequent random fluctuation brought a new lineage to the fore. This is why we see these other Japhetic haplogroups. It's literally redundant. This may have been the case among the living Samaritans of Israel. Their genealogy is restricted to 4 main families, but the Kohen family claims the Samaritan priesthood, carries haplogroup E. All right, so even the Samaritan priesthood family among the Samaritan Jews, they have haplogroup E, and they claim to be Levites. The Limba, who claim to be Levites, they have haplogroup E. We can continue to go into tribes that, that's further into Africa, such as your Akan, who have Levi clans who are haplogroup E. So again, the common denominator, or the main thing I want you all to get out of this, is that, the ancient Israelites would have had E, and the people we see in Africa today are a result, or are those descendants. This is why we see these people with these Judaic customs. This is why we see all these different biblical cities, all these biblical names within these sub-Saharan African places. This is why we see Old Testament traditions and customs in sub-Saharan Africa, because the Israelites migrated there and took over. In contrast, the other main Samaritan Y chromosomes belong to haplogroup J. All right, since it is conceivably possible that something similar could have happened or could have occurred among the Jews at some point in history, it is not possible to definitively state that the Kohen model haplotype is Aaron's Y chromosome. However, it is still likely, especially when one considers that the fact that the men who carry it trace their tradition of being among the Kohanim to a time prior to the diaspora, which began before 500 BCE. So these people among the Samaritan priesthood who have haplogroup E, they claim they have this tradition that goes back prior to the diaspora in 500 BCE. So again, it's highly likely that the original Kohen model haplotype would be EP2 haplotypes. All right, EP2 haplotypes. Now, to prove this, let's go to the Kohen Zadoks. All right, let's go to the Kohen Zadoks. I'm sure you all know the history about the Zadoks. So the Zadoks, all right, the priestly Zadoks. And what do we see? Haplogroup EM2. All right. Kohen family tree DNA. We see haplogroup EM2, location Hungary. He's an Ashkenazi. All right. Haplogroup EM2, England, Wingfield. All right. His name is Harris. So we see EM2 within these Kohen samples published, just like we've seen it within the Limba. Again, more Kohen E1b1a samples. EP278, EP277, EM2. These are all E3A or E1b1a. And to the brother within the chat that just said, most of West Africa is descended from the Libyans, Egypt, and ancient Ethiopia. May you please drop a source to say that. May you please drop a source to reflect your thoughts. Now, I would agree with that statement from a small standpoint. I would agree that, yes, majority of the people in Western Africa, they probably did migrate from Egypt and from Ethiopia and from Libya, but they themselves are not Libyans, Egyptians, or Ethiopians. Even if we take it back a step further, we go to the sons of Ibrahim, or the Abraham sons. We see EM2, 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 Saudi Arabia and Egypt. All right. So again, E1b1a is without a doubt Semitic. It is without a doubt an Israelite lineage. Again, Abraham's sons, we see M2, M2, M2. This is not surprising. Again, Abraham's sons, M2, M2, EU174. And that's talking about my brother down there in Ghana. And then we even have a brother down there in Jamaica that made the list, all right? And more than likely, he's from the Sephardim. Again, we have a Iberian Ashkenazi family tree DNA, and we can see M2 within them as well. As we brought out in the history of African gene flow in Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. 3% of Ashkenazis carry this haplotype, and that was just of those that were sampled or tested. Again, Iberian Ashkenazi, EM2, 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 EU174. All right. So again, and even right here, Archie Cunningham. This is a so-called Jew who works at, I'm not even going to give his information out, but just know that we have more information about Archie Cunningham. Let me go back one. I skipped one, family. So now we're dealing with the Jewish E Project, Family Tree DNA. Again, we see EM2 or E1b1a right here. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 samples right here. And again, we see a Native American with E1b1a or EM2. This Native American we could consider an Israelite, right? So once we start finding Native Americans out there from McCamp Brothers, when we start finding Native Americans out there with our DNA, that's when we could consider these people, our people. Continuing, again, Jewish E Project. We see EM2 at the top, EM2 at the bottom. Again, Jewish E Project, EM2 at the top, EU174, and EM2. So again, for those in the chat that's in opposed to the information I'm bringing out, please go ahead and drop your sources or, ask the questions. And even I have a question for you. If these people with EM2 aren't Israelites, who are they? And how did the ancient Israelites have, this African EM2 ancestry? Again, Jewish E Project, Haplogroup E, Walker Daniels, Evans. And thank you. Like the brother Lion Farm just said, it's called a back migration into Africa. All right. Again, there's two theories going on within the science realm. One theory states that Haplogroup E homeland is in East Africa and it went outside of Africa. And there's another theory that states that Haplogroup's origin is in Southwest Asia and it migrated into Africa. Either way it go, the Haplogroup E lineage would be associated with Semitic speaking peoples and Semitic people in general. Again, Jewish E Project, EM2, EU170, and EM2. And even if we get into that name Stewart, we know that was a prominent Sephardic family, and even a lot of Stewarts made their way into Jamaica. We have DNA reflecting that. Again, now we're going to go to Hebrew DNA. All right, look at the Hebrew DNA submitted into family tree DNA. We can see M2 samples. We see M2 at the very top and the M2 in the very middle. And this is coming from the United States. So if this brother's claiming to be a Hebrew and he in the United States and he's EM2, what about the other millions of EM2 or E1b1a people in the United States? And again, Hebrew DNA, family tree DNA, EU170. We have another Native American. More than likely, this is an Afro-Native. And let's see, I believe that is it. Nope, got one more. Hebrew DNA again. Got two EM2 samples once more. Got more EM2 samples. So we can find EM2 samples in a lot of, Jewish populations, Hebrew populations, Semitic populations, period. We showed you how it's possible for Afro-Asiatic speaking peoples to lose their tongue in the beginning of the presentation. So if you didn't watch, if you didn't catch that, go back and watch it. But again, we have more EM2 samples submitted under the Hebrew DNA family tree. And with that, that's the end of this presentation. So I'm going to close this out and I'm going to go back to the chat. If anybody has any questions, comments, please go ahead and drop them. I'm going to see if I can catch up with the chat real quick. Y'all willing, I'll be back this Shabbat and we'll do a book reading from the book, the Efik Palestinian Origins, getting into the Efik people of Calabar and their oral traditions of being Israelites and how they migrated from Palestine down into Nigeria, Calabar. And guess what? They are EM2. Shalom, shalom, brother. Shalom, shalom. Let's see. Shalom to the family. Shalom. Peace and blessings, family. Let's see. So again, family, this will more than likely be one of the last videos we're doing, solely on DNA. I might incorporate it into other videos if it's needed. But it seems like we've pretty much proven everything we needed thus far. From the genetic standpoint, we know only D and E can be Semitic. Really. We know Haplogroup D is all the way over in Asia and the Andaman Islands. And exactly, there is no Kohan haplogroup. And I don't even know how they came to that conclusion. I really don't even know how they came to that conclusion, as if Aaron would have a different haplogroup from the rest of the Israelites. They would have the same haplogroup as every other Israelite. Nothing different. Salama Shalom. Excuse me. Shalom, family. Shalom. And again, brother, if you're still watching, please make sure you can go ahead and drop that source. You know what I'm saying? Or just re-edify what you were saying. And again, family, make sure you go check out the Brother Lion Farm channel. If you have not already seen, he's brought out plenty of E1b1a samples outside of Africa. Like he's showing right here, we got E1b1a in Iran 12,000 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And even he brought it out in Turkmenistan. So go catch up on some of the latest of his videos to get the sources and information on that. Let's see. Brother Line Farm said again, E1BA, excuse me, E1BA, E1b1a roots above summer connection to the Levant by the Tufian roots. So going into Africa makes them Eurasian. Literally, it makes them Eurasian. And as we read earlier, the Eurasian haplogroup E seems to have came into the Western Sahel and replaced the old autonomous or the autonomous haplogroups A and B. So haplogroup E came in from Eurasia or the Levant or North Africa and replaced all those that was in Western Africa and even Central Africa and pushed the other ones down into South. And again, what I just said, the brother reiterated right after it. As it is known, E1b1a, V38, Slade, A and B haplogroups. All right, A and B are the native African haplogroups, and that's indeed true. We brought that out. So the brother said the original meaning of Ethiopian, according to the ancient Greeks, seemed to imply facial scarification, which was practiced by many people in Africa. Many of their sculptures or masks have this, and no, it doesn't, my brother. The original meaning of Ethiopia means burnt face. So again, I don't know what you're talking about or referring to. So please reiterate it one more time for me, because the ancient word for Ethiopia does not mean or seem to imply facial scarification. Ethiopia means burnt face. That's funny. Nice try. And again, E haplogroup Shemites of the ancient Levant, Natufian's homeland, migration to Sumer. As I said in the beginning of the video, family, haplogroup E is an ancient Middle Eastern haplogroup. We wouldn't expect it to see it. We shouldn't expect it to see this haplogroup dominate the Levant. If we look at the history of the Israelites, if we look at the history of the Moabites, if we look at the history of the sons of Ishmael, if we look at the history of the Jokhtanites, all of these people made their way into Africa. So, including the Israelites, all right? Including the Israelites. And the brother definitely does need a history lesson for trying to say that Ethiopia means scarification. I've never heard that in my life, nor have I ever saw that. But again, I'm gonna kick back for about 1-2 more minutes, man. Let you all get your comments in if you have any. If not, I see you all this Shabbat. We're gonna get it to the history, man. And even with the Akkadians, man, I have some information on the Akkadians that I can bring out, but I'm just trying to put a lot together before I even get into, the haplogroups of other sons of Shem we see today. And even the brother Neri Yahu, he brought up something very, very interesting that I'm still looking into, trying to make connections to or connections with. Matter of fact, if any of you all out there are, into this type of studies, haplogroups, paternal DNA and things like that, see if you can find any connections between, the Ibero-Marusians and the sons of Lud. All right. And the brother Neri Yahoo did a pretty good job at explaining why he was looking into it, and it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. But again, peace, shalom, and blessings to all. I will see you all this Shabbat and enjoy the rest of you all day. Make sure you like the video, thumbs it up on your way out, and even share it to your friends, man. All praise to the Most High. See you Shabbat.